a brain lacks sufficient musical training to quickly reduce the notes it hears to roughly 7 events or fewer, it will not be able to piece together what it is hearing. The musical now will collapse, leaving only fragments of understanding and mostly noise. Deeper relations also appear to be inherently difficult to observe. But sensing a sound is much easier than identifying its various aspects. These limitations in perceptual speed mean that notes can come at us only so quickly if we're to be able to pick them up. Do you feel like your hearing and your listening experience has developed over the years? Let me know in the comment section below. I'm Elan DARE. This is my music channel. You can find music, talks, jams.
Please subscribe if you haven't done so and let me know what you think.
Why is this easier to listen or enjoy than this? Can we enjoy music that is played very fast? To fully or at least partly appreciate something like this, for a prolonged period of time, we need to train our ears to be faster. What exactly do I mean by slow ears or fast ears, as this is not cognitively or anatomically possible? I am concretely talking about our brain. The brain is in charge of decoding all the vibrations it receives into the music we are able to perceive. And we don't have to think for this to happen. Circumstances and conditions will vary greatly from person to person, and there's many factors that play in the way our skills and brains develop. However, to form deep relations in our brain, we need to be able to reduce many elements within a system of structures into single powerful observations. Listening is an untapped ability for most brains. What we know as talent or neurological or genetical advantage makes the task of listening easier for some. Nonetheless, deep relations can be formed by a trained mind. Our brains are equipped to listen to exciting, intricate music if we train them. Listening can be just like reading. If all you ever read is children's books, as amazing as they are, you'd be missing out on a lot more. Why can we easily remember all the characters and details from our favorite TV drama, but we struggle so much following and reading that fat book everyone recommends? It could be that it's boring and we're not interested, but this also has to do with the rate at which we receive information.
Built a home and watched it burn.
And the relations between elements that each of us is able to form in our brain. In music, the performer or composer sets the rate at which we will receive information and therefore observe, organize, and classify it. They'll use elements like tempo and rhythm, melodic phrasing, and harmony, and the interplay between those elements. The speed at which those musical structures are presented to us will affect how we perceive the music. The perception of one piece of music can be widely different for each individual. Recorded and performed music presents our brain with the longest sonic objects that we ever experience. Our brains are able to chunk music in part thanks to rhythm. Rhythm helps us to renew our attention through accents and pauses. We form our experience of music by perceiving small bits of information that then we group into larger bits of information. The longest musical objects are only observed after a series of events unfold. So you grasp the longest musical objects after you've received all those smaller bits of information to complete a phrase, and then phrases complete entire sections, and then the sections complete the entire piece. And repeat. So why is this easier to listen or enjoy than this? As the musical objects increase in complexity, the mind needs to work harder. In music, just like in speech, when we have a set of words or pitches forming a complete idea, like a statement or a question, we call that a phrase. With that in mind, let's isolate one musical element from two different pieces of music. We are gonna isolate the melody. I'm just going to play the first phrase on two different pieces of music. One is easy to grasp, maybe because it resembles speech. I could easily put lyrics to the first one because it resembles speech. In the morning. If I try that with the second one. I don't even know what to come up with. As you can see, when the phrasing resembles spoken language, it's easier to understand. But with more tense, extended phrasing that doesn't resolve like typical speech does, it then becomes harder for the listener to understand. Skilled and learned minds will have an easier time comprehending complex music. Complexity can come from one or many factors, like melodic phrasing, harmonic information, and rhythm. These layers of patterns are the ones that give us the experience of music that, for example, an animal brain can't grasp. Earlier, I talked about the rate and speed at which musical events are presented to us. If an event unfolds in an extremely slow way, or the opposite, it unfolds extremely quickly, our nervous system won't sense the events. For instance, the special performance of John Cage's organ 2/ASLSP or As Slowly as Possible, which is scheduled to last 639 years, thanks to a group of artists that built a special organ to perform this piece over the course of that time, so that it is the slowest performance ever done for that piece of music. However, essentially, what that performance means is that we won't ever be able to get the overall picture or structure of the piece. The events unfold extremely slowly, and we just won't be able to sense that performance as a whole event. On the fast end of the spectrum, a good example could be bebop, the style within jazz that uses fast tempos and long extended phrasing. The melodic phrasing in tunes and solos can last longer than expected, and the harmony changes rapidly. Rap can have this effect too. For instance, Godzilla, where Eminem raps an average of 10 syllables per second. At this rate, we start missing information and details, and it can become a blur for most. If music is played too quickly, we don't have time to process and start missing details. We can still experience at low perceptual levels. This means that we don't form any relations between small events, but our brain goes for the bigger picture. And I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing. Simply, our brain is prioritizing. The patterns of relations or associations we make among the elements we perceive must be paced in such a way that we are able to observe the connection between those elements. In other words, we need time to find these deep relations, to pick up whatever is going on. This is true both for speech and for music. For example, I always think of prodigies as having really fast ears. Oftentimes, prodigies can play tunes so fast that they become almost unintelligible for most of us. And don't get me wrong, that blur can be just as thrilling as understanding every specific element within a piece of music. Take for example Hiromi's The Tom and Jerry Show. This is a tune I've learned and I love to play it. However, the performances between Hiromi and I are widely different. Hiromi plays it so fast, the textures are a completely different thing. You hear a completely different texture when you play it at a much slower speed. So is it impossible to read and follow that fat book that people recommend? Sometimes we miss the beauty we are equipped to enjoy because we don't have the tools to see it and understand it. But clearly, millions of people before us have done it. Unless you have that genetical advantage and these tasks come easier to you, most brains need to be trained to process the information and find deep relations that enable understanding. I'm not trying to criticize genres or specific musical pieces or saying that complex is better than simple. And I also don't want to criticize the listener. This is about how our brains perceive music. The present, the now, is full of starts and stops. Moments don't concretely meld into one another. We receive information, stop, analyze. Receive information, stop, analyze. Now is nothing without memory and anticipation. Music doesn't echo in our brain. The brain observes relations in the music, and our brain continues to experience the memory of those relations at the same time that it anticipates what is about to happen. Because of how limited our perception of the now is, and because not everyone brings the same toolkit to their music listening experience, some music requires many hearings before it can be listened to successfully because it's full of intricacies. Catchy music can be good, but do composers and producers, at times, prey excessively on memory and anticipation? Just because there's an industry that thinks they know what we want to hear doesn't mean that they can't challenge us as listeners. Our brains are capable of much more. We undervalue our hearing. Even though a lot of animals can hear, they can never have the experience of music that we do. The complex relations of patterns upon patterns are only perceived in the human brain. But our minds don't know what they're missing out on because listening is conditioned by learning. This is an invitation to anyone watching to tap into those listening abilities. I'm Elan DARE, this is my music channel. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to subscribe and leave me your thoughts below. You can also follow me for the whole Elan DARE experience on TikTok, Instagram, SoundCloud, here, Spotify.